All right, hello. Oh, whoops. All right, that's better. So I got this in the mail the other day, and this is an ISCO 2x anamorphic adapter. I'm really excited for this. If you don't know anything about these, they're a little bit strange. They work a little bit differently than regular anamorphic lenses, but basically you are going to clamp a lens to the back of this thing, like this one. So this is an old Canon, whatever lens this is, I kind of forget, but you're gonna clamp a tiny lens like this to the back, and then another apparatus actually goes on to the front. And then like there's a sleeve, and then there's a front focusing element. It's gonna be really cool. So keep an eye out for all that kind of cool stuff to come in a later video. But we of course are not here for that. You clicked on this video for the title, and that is because today we are discussing this video.
I can go back here and I can bring down my highlights. But again, if you try it with your own raw footage, and again, it doesn't matter if it's the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, the Pocket 6K, or the Canon C200, or even the RAW that Atomos is able to capture out of the Canon C300 Mark II, you can't do this.
So in that video, Carlos makes a couple claims that I don't believe are totally accurate, and that is just the main reason that I wanted to make this video here. So I'm in the middle of editing this video, and I realized I should probably include some footage of my past DP work, so you know that I'm not totally talking out my butt for this. All right, so with that shown, back to the video. And a couple of those claims are in the video, and a couple of them are in the comments here. Matthias Souza, sorry if I mess up your name, says, sorry, but I don't know what you're on about. If you expose properly, then change the ISO to max in post, you can just bring it right back down using curves, gain wheel, or whatever. Yes, even on my 1300 Pocket 4K. Now that is true. I'm going to show you how to do it, and it works pretty much exactly the same as what Carlos was doing. But Carlos does say, so that is not true. I own one of the Pocket 4K and two of the Pocket 6K, and neither can do what I showed in this video. So I just wanted to push back a little bit on this video here, because I do think that he makes some claims that are not totally accurate. Now, I mainly have experience with Blackmagic RAW and tons of experience with REDCode RAW, and they are both wonderful pipelines to work in. I really love Reds and what they've done with the whole 16-bit RAW. I mean, like, that's pretty crazy. And then Blackmagic has also done some really awesome stuff. There's this 12-bit, so I think Reds does have an inherent value that way, has just, you know, an advantage that way. But we're going to talk about why that's pretty minuscule in comparison. But first, let's look at a couple other of these comments. So Tony Day says, I don't get it. In DaVinci Resolve, you can set RCM to red IPP2, which is what we're going to do in just a second. Mapping to literally do the exact same thing with any footage, even Rec 709 footage like Canon wide dynamic range if you wanted to. I guess in summation, yes, you absolutely can do what you're showing with these other RAW codecs. I've literally done it with B-RAW on many of my projects. I have as well, Tony, so we're gonna get into that in just one second. Last one with Daryl Smith. So Daryl Smith says, we would like to actually see the exact same test with B-RAW. And when I read that, I was like, I would too. So we're gonna do it. Carlos says, anyone want to step up and make the B-RAW video demonstration similar to this? So I did shoot some footage on my Blackmagic Pocket 6K camera, and of course whenever I'm applying the lookup table in the post-production process, I was using the same one that he was using, which is the Red Rec 709 IPP2 medium contrast, very soft highlight roll-off. It actually looks pretty good. I might start using it a lot more. So let's go ahead, jump over to the computer and get into it. All right, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and I went ahead and just made us a new timeline. This consists of some test footage I shot today, as well as some other footage that we're gonna dive into in just a bit that I shot about a month ago with my girlfriend in Tulsa. And so we're just gonna look at some of this footage. Interestingly enough, when I went to kind of replicate the tests that Carlos did with his 8K helium red, I believe it was, is that I actually couldn't totally replicate it because of the dual nature ISO of the Blackmagic 6K, and I assume the Blackmagic 4K would work exactly the same. So I actually had to try this out twice to get the kind of results I was looking for to accurately replicate what Carlos was doing in his videos. So I tried this out a couple different ways. First one was ISO 1600, second one was ISO 3200, fourth was ISO 500, and these were all exposed correctly, so that if I pop over here into Resolve, you'll see that the waveform module over here is showing me that they are pretty much properly exposed. But like I was saying, I actually couldn't get this to work properly, and I'll show you how in just a second. But before I do that, I did go and shoot a couple overexposure tests. So slightly overexposed at ISO 1600, same thing 32, same thing 400. I actually meant to do it at 400 on this test right here, but I just kind of messed up. No big deal though, I don't think. So here's what I ran into is that, let's just take the ISO 500 for instance. If I switch this to clip, and then let me just use the red IPP2, the same LUT that Carlos was using. So medium contrast, very soft, highlight roll off. And there we go. So we can see that pops up the highlights and just gives it a little bit more contrast. It looks really nice. I love these red LUTs. I think they're super awesome. If I bang this up to 1000, it still wasn't giving me the clipping value. And as you might know, with a dual ISO camera, you can't go higher than what your ISO selection will give you. So I can go all the way up to 1000 on anything below 1000. I can go up to 1000 ISO, whereas on anything above 1000, so for instance in this 3200 clip, if I switch this down to clip and then do my LUT right there, I can go all the way up to 6400, but I can't cross that threshold down into 1000. And as you'll notice, even if I put this one up to 6400, it's still not giving me the clipping that I was wanting. So just bear with me here. So what I had to do was actually expose this clip a little bit hotter than what I normally would. So I exposed it a little bit to the right, and I'm just going to go and select all these. So this one was ISO 400. Here is the LUT, same one. And you can see now I am closer to the clipping point, and if I bring this on up to 1000, I am pretty well clipped. But you'll notice that the Blackmagic is giving me the same type of reading that the red camera was in his video. So there is 400, and you can see it is just squishing these highlights up and up and up, but it does give you tons of latitude to where it doesn't actually clip. So if I bring this back down, all that information is there. I can, of course, do the same thing with the dark portions of the frame, and there you go. So let's go ahead and check out the 3200. So same thing here, just popping on the LUT, ISO 6400. Now that's really close, but it's not totally clipping, and that's a pretty that's pretty well overexposed. I mean, that would be a real issue. This is pretty darn near white. All that information would pretty well be gone on any camera not shooting some type of RAW recording. But once again, I can just bring it back down exactly as he did with his red. And of course, since ISO 1600 is over that 1000 threshold, it was exposed practically the same. I'm really not going to have any issues bringing this back down again. So there is 6400. Now that is clipped right there. So that is a little bit over the threshold. You can see you can see it touching on my waveform and on my histogram. So let's go ahead and click this and bring it back down. So notice how it's just decompressing that signal up there, and that's because contrary to what Carlos said in his video, pretty much all RAW formats that I know of anyway, they retain that information even when you do something crazy like this. I don't know why you would want to do something like this, but they retain all that information. That's basically what RAW is, and so you can do this with any type of RAW recording format. So let's go over to one more clip I had just on retainer here. This video clip is clipped pretty significantly. So if I change this to clip and then pop on my IPP2 LUT, and I can bring this up to 1000, you notice that this is now clipped pretty significantly, whereas if I go back down to 100, I do have quite a bit of information there. Now, of course, I don't have any information on the sun. That's because the sun, of course, is just completely blown out. I don't think any camera would ever allow you to photograph the sun as well as expose properly for like grass and stuff like that. Really cool feature of Blackmagic RAW though is you can click highlight recovery, and that will get you a lot of that information back, which is kind of nice. So there's with it off and there's with it on. Just gets you a little bit more detail in that bright portion back. But let's go ahead and clip this out pretty well. So there, so now you'll notice that more of this image is clipping up top as compared to the 100. So now beforehand, this was not clipped over here and this was not clipped over here to the left. And now if I bring that on up, it is now completely shelving at the top there. And that's because I didn't expose this image properly for the sun, of course. So let's go ahead and just bring this down. And there you go. So now I can bring my black level down, of course. Now, I would never really be able to get the sun back because the sun is just, a huge white point in the frame. So you wouldn't want to go too far with this because then you start creating like an artificial white point that doesn't really exist in real life. So you don't want to go too far, even though you can recover just so much of this back. It's pretty incredible. So let's bring it down. I can recover pretty much all the data that is there even at my higher ISO values, which is what Carlos was saying you can't do with other RAW formats. And so I just wanted to make this video, put this video out there showing the capabilities of Blackmagic RAW. I gotta be honest, I have not worked with Canon RAW Lite at all. Same thing with the Kinefinity RAW and same thing with Z RAW. But I have worked a lot with Blackmagic RAW and a lot with REDCode RAW, and I love them both. I think they're both just wonderful codecs. But I just want people to be informed of what is actually going on here. And then same thing with this last clip right here. This one isn't as solid of an example, but I figured I could just show it. I'm gonna give it my clip settings here. It's pretty well exposed. So let's go ahead and pop on our red LUT, our IPP2, medium contrast, very soft, and click all the way up to 1000. Now that is pretty well clipped out. You'll notice that it does retain the information though. So it's not all, at least in the red channel, in the green channel, and in the blue channel, it does look like it is clipping. So let's bring this back down. And again, all that information is still there for us to manipulate and use however we see fit. So I'm just adjusting the black points. And you can do this pretty much with any way that you want to. I'm just doing it with the curves right now, which is just my preferred way of doing it. But you can do it with your lift, gamma, and gain wheels. You can also do it a couple other ways. And I just reset my histogram curves adjustments really quick, but you can see that if you push this camera far enough, it will clip. But again, just to kind of push back against Carlos's point that you cannot recover this information, as you can see, you very much can. All that information is still there, and it still allows you to manipulate it however you want. And so, yeah, but this video, I don't mean this in any kind of malicious way. I just want to provide accurate information to those working with Blackmagic RAW as well as REDCode RAW, as they seem to be anyway the most common RAW formats nowadays, with the exception of maybe RAW for the bigger productions. But so with that said, I hope this little screen cap right here was informative to you and that it helps you when you go to expose your footage and also to properly master your footage. So as you saw in that video demonstration, you can do pretty much exactly the same thing that Carlos was doing with his red helium 8K footage with a camera like the Pocket 6K. Again, I did have to work around it a little bit just because of the dual native ISO, but I think I achieved the same results that he was able to get. Really, the last point I want to leave you with on this video is this comment by Victor Seastrom on Carlos's video. So he says at the end of this thread, with all due respect, the truth is, if you correctly expose any of these cameras, you'll get great images. I personally would never buy a camera from a company that tries to nickel and dime you into poverty by forcing you to buy their proprietary accessories. And that is kind of how I feel about Red, honestly. And I've shot on Red, I've shot on Blackmagic, of course, I've shot on Canon, and really they all get you really good images. We're kind of to the point now where you don't necessarily have to worry too much about the camera that you're shooting on, because they're all just getting you so much information anyway. I mean, 12-bit RAW is usually more than enough to get you a really good image. And then when you're stepping up to resolutions like 6K and 8K and all this kind of stuff, the law of diminishing returns, I really think, starts to take effect. Now, that's not to say that RED doesn't have some definite advantages over a camera like the Pocket 6K, because of course it does. I think the main advantage of RED is not the dynamic range, but more so just the modularity of the system and how well everything works together. Now, you do pay a hefty premium for all that, but I really love the modularity and just kind of the form factor that most REDs have, pretty much all REDs have. But really, like I said, the last thing I want to touch on is the thing that Victor said, that most cameras are going to get you more than enough information nowadays. I mean, we really do live in quite a cool time where you can buy a $3,000, $4,000 camera and get really good, high quality, high dynamic range, high resolution images, and that's pretty cool, honestly. Like that would have been unheard of even maybe 5 years ago. And I'll leave you with this: if you haven't watched Steve Yedlin's discourse on resolution and cameras that he has on his website, and if you don't know, Steve Yedlin is a great DP. He DP'd The Last Jedi, he DP'd Knives Out most recently, but he makes the case that it's really less about resolution and more about just gathering enough information overall. So that includes resolution, but it also includes dynamic range, it includes bit depth, it includes RAW capabilities, all that kind of stuff. It just includes everything into getting a good image, and then from that you can make that image pretty much whatever you want. But I think that point really does extend to Blackmagic and to Canon and to Sony, because we are now getting to the point where these smaller cameras have the capabilities to perform really well. And if you'd like to see the video of this anamorphic adapter and all that kind of goodness, make sure to tune back in, maybe leave a comment down below, because I'm still kind of up in the air. I don't really do YouTube stuff a whole lot, but I don't know, the quarantine has made me really bored, and so I figured this might be a good opportunity to kind of go for it. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day.